look. And basically, again, this should be technical support. I don't think it's a long-term support, but in the very least, I do expect a bump here in Bitcoin. Again, if you zoom out on the chart here, you can see very clearly this was a major, I mean, this was a cycle pivot high going back to
Yep.
2017. So it would be very surprising. The way technicals work, usually these major pivot highs give a sustainable bounce for at least a month or two in a bear cycle before they break significantly lower. Now, we obviously know what's going on with Celsius, and we saw Terra Luna. So there are dominoes that are falling. It's very reminiscent to the dot-com bubble bursting, which to me tells me there's still more downside to come eventually. But in the near term, I think a move back really right in this area here to 25 and change, that would be a very reasonable target in the near term. That's that pivot low from the Terra Luna UST collapse. And then if we get a little bit through that, then you would start hitting major resistance around 28.5, 28.6 on Bitcoin. I would be somewhat surprised if we get through the second line here, considering everything that's going on. And again, we have to remember that you still have the Fed tightening. They're not going to start printing at least till the end of the year. I know that's even, hard to imagine that they go back to that, but I do think that the economy will get in a position where they probably will have to, again, maybe late this year or next year. And then that's probably where you find a bottom. And one other little tidbit here is if you look at past Bitcoin cycles, it's usually about 12 months or so before the bottom is put in. So if you go to 2018, it took about 12 months. Same thing with 2013's major high. So it makes sense that somewhere November, December, we could see that low on Bitcoin. I have a calculated target out to 12,000. 12,000 would be right in that ballpark of 80 to 85% correction, which is the normal correction Bitcoin sees in a bear market. And then there's also something called a measured move here, where if you look at this big down move, right? So if you take this 69,000 high and you take it to this low, which is basically a straight shot, we have a few bounces along the way. And then you had this longer period of consolidation right in here, right? These parallel lines. If you take the high of that consolidation and stretch a measured move down, that's comes out to be right at 12,000. So there's something in technical analysis where we call it a measured move, where you have a major move with an in-between kind of resting period, and then that same distance occurs again. That gives us that 12,000 target. Now, could Bitcoin go below there? Sure, it could. Anything can happen. But for me, that's kind of where I will start to say, okay, we may have a major bottom in place here. And I'll certainly be starting to accumulate once we're significantly below 20,000.
So short-term element, whether we see a 25 or possibly a 28 would be kind of on the outset here. With all of the macro pressure that we are experiencing right now, obviously we've seen inflation, we're not looking at necessarily any slowdown on CPI, data coming in from pricing and just in general prices overall to American consumers, really global consumers. If you play all that into it, because I'm still leaning in the camp that is we are yet to see max pain, because I'm concerned that we are trailing a little bit, one, on how the Fed will respond to how the market goes. Now, there will be a period of time, whether it's Q3 or Q4, where the market, the smart money, will start to see the early indicators. And the early indicators are, buying maybe right before it hits the bottom and ready to ride, kind of that rocket ship, either in through a recovery or possibly into the softening backside of a recession. If you look at market indicators and also macros like that playing into it, and we do see Q3, Q4 roll out, and we still are on positive moves on interest rate, continued price hikes overall, cost of everything are continuing to go up. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, because we're seeing kind of unprecedented situations right here.
Yeah, we certainly are. So I'm right with you in that we definitely have not seen max pain. And the reason I can tell that, and I'm sure you can tell that as well, is that in past cycles, I know you've been around for a long time like me, when you get to max pain, people don't even want to talk about it. They just kind of throw up their hands in kind of giving in, defeat, right? And you still see, when we get at this 20,000 level, people are still like, oh, I'm going to buy more. It's going to go back to all-time highs in no time at all. That mentality shows you a lot. And that tells you you're not at that bottom yet. So again, is it going to be 12,000? Is it going to be lower than that? The only kind of caveat, and again, I've been kind of riding this 20 was my high end, 12 is my low end. But one of the things that makes me a little nervous is that if this is the .com moment for cryptocurrency,
Right.
then I go to Amazon's chart in 2000, right? And what's interesting about that is it's the exact same pattern on Amazon. You have the
Yeah.
same MTOP that you have on Bitcoin at this point, and Amazon went from $112 down to about $7 to $6. It's about a 95% drop, right? So you have to think in those terms. A good trader is always going to think about all angles and try to be as prepared as possible no matter what occurs. So I'm in agreement with you. I think that you will see inflation start to come in. We've already seen oil coming in sharply. That will eventually filter out. Also, natural gas has been tumbling as well. But I don't think Bitcoin is near that max pain, not yet.
Yeah. One thing that concerns me right now is the situation with China. A lot more pressure. We'll talk about that here in a minute with our stories as we wrap up the show. But one thing for sure is if we do see kind of a global reserve positioning, whether it's the yuan or you look at potentially a digital dollar that could emerge, there's a lot of things happening within the European Union, which is really kind of getting into a lot more legislation. Now we may see, a mock print of that same kind of concept of what they're doing from a regulatory standard under MiCA, possibly show up in Capitol Hill. And I know Kevin O'Leary talks about this a lot, is that with USDC possibly being regulated, that would really open up the gates on, institutional finance starting to move into the place. And when I say the place, meaning cryptocurrency, our place. If that were to occur and we got some light load on the back end of this year, and you kind of look at next year, 2023, where would you see the potential for Bitcoin in that next cycle, say Q1 and Q3? Anything that you're looking for in a long-term outlook for that?
Yeah, so longer term, I'm hugely bullish on Bitcoin. I continue to be. I'm less bullish on a lot of the altcoins for reasons that you've mentioned here, which is, again, what use case do they have? Is it a use case that makes them a security, or is it a
Right.
commodity, or what? And we know that regulation is at some point going to differentiate. And then what does that mean for them? I think Ethereum survives. There's so much built on Ethereum at this point, but we have to be, as investors, I'm very much focusing on Bitcoin and Ethereum as my top holdings in the next cycle, just because, again, I don't have clarity on a lot of these rules and regulations that inevitably are going to come. And in all fairness, I do want some regulation. I just want the right type of regulation. I want the
Sure.
regulation that protects the consumer, right? The ones where if your account gets hacked and you lose your Bitcoin, it's insured like an FDIC insurance, which isn't there now. So yeah, I'm in the camp that the next leg up is going to be the mega leg up. It's going to take us to at least 100,000, maybe even 250 or higher. And again, all these things are going to start to culminate. The fact that the Federal Reserve can't put the genie back in the bottle with inflation. Yes, it's going to come down. I think it gets sticky around 4 to 5%, and it
Yep.
stays there. And as soon as you see unemployment start to go up dramatically due to a recession, which we know we're going to have at some point, and
Yep.
we could even be heading that way, at some point they're going to look at inflation and saying, all right, 4 to 5%, it's not great, but
Right.
we'll tolerate it because we have 10% unemployment. Let's start
Mhm.
printing money again, right? And then it's that whole big thing again. And that's where I think that Bitcoin next